To live, you need money, and for money, you need a job, and for a job, you need to go to an office or leave the house in some way for at least 10 hours a day and then come back at the end of it. Or do you? We're going to be talking about all that and more, but first, coffee. So today's beans are kind of exciting. It's from Ethiopia. These are Ethiopian Sidamo. Not 100% sure what's special about these beans, but the guy who imports them for me, he only gets them in sometimes, so they're like limited edition or something. So as a result of a certain virus attacking the entire world, it has been recommended that if you don't need to leave the house, that you stay at home and try not to infect other people or get infected by going outside, right? And I understand that. The question is, why is it so difficult, considering all the technology that we have? You know, we have the internet, we can shop for things online, get things delivered, we can all work on our computers, and yet it all seems to be so difficult for us to actually do our jobs from home. And I'm wondering, like, with all this technology, why is this still an issue? Let's grind! So the main thing that seems to be a big issue is that we all have to stay home and not infect other people. But by staying home, for some reason, we're unable to do our jobs. I'm trying to figure out, what is it that we actually do at work that requires us to be at work? So I'm absolutely not arguing that you can't do your job at home. I'm just wondering why most employers haven't made it so that everyone is working at home. And the only real reason I can think of is that they just don't trust us to actually do our jobs when we're at home. Maybe there's just no way to actually check up on these people. Let's say you have a company with 100 employees. When they're in the office, you're in the same room with them, and so you can check up on them and see that they're not just playing on their phones the whole time. It's like, what are we actually paying these people to do? Otherwise, we're better off just not paying them, right? Well, I'm not saying like put a camera in everyone's house, but if there were a way to actually have the work be submitted at certain times and make sure that progress is being made, then why exactly do we need to be in offices anyway? Now, the main reason why I think people need to be in an office is so that they, just are straight up not lonely. Not everyone is married and has a family or lives with their grandparents or has people around them or live with friends in a dormitory. Not everyone has that luxury of company, right? So I understand that for some people, going to work is the only time that we'll meet other people in our lives anyway. So it is important that we do leave the house. But in a situation like this, where it's actually safer that we stay home, and we don't know for how long. It could be for the next couple weeks, it might be for the next few months, it could be for like the rest of the year. We really cannot afford to be in large gatherings and all this. And so what we're seeing on the internet is events like, I think E3 has been cancelled, a lot of fighting game events, I'm not going to say most, but a large number of fighting games were cancelled because that brings in maybe a few hundred people, or maybe 1,000 people. And they're all going to be sitting down close to each other because they're right next to each other playing Smash Brothers or Street Fighter or Under Night In-Birth, whatever it is they're playing on these consoles at these tournaments. And so what we're seeing is that these events are increasingly trying to run as much as possible online. Now, it's another step. Monetizing a physical event, you get people to pay money because you're renting the venue space. But once it's an online event and it becomes an ethereal product, it gets harder and harder to get people to pay the money for it. Though, of course, obviously, we're much further ahead than we were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was like the idea of paying for a download-only game. That was like kind of crazy. But now it's like on PC, that's like the only kind of game that we've got. It's like they're all download-only. Almost. So for gaming events or things like E3 where they're just... Oh, I forgot to put the water on. Hold on, let me go and turn the... I'm going to be sitting here waiting the whole time. Oh dear, forgot to turn the hot water on. But that is just for gaming events, things like E3. They could just do those presentations online. And I've actually been thinking about doing a completely separate video about how we could take advantage of the situation, or not take advantage of the situation, or make the best of our situation by increasing the amount of 360 cameras that we use, virtual reality, give people a sense of presence at these events, even though they're happening online. It would be nice if the presentations were still set up virtually, but we could use, those of us that have VR headsets, and of course it's a luxury item, so not everyone has them, but we could use our phones even just to check out events in 360 degrees, look at all the different presentations, we could have virtual 3D characters as part of presentations as well. I think there's a lot of potential for ways that we could make the most of this situation. I'm not going to say take advantage because it's not an advantageous situation. It would be much nicer if we could just run these events physically. But the biggest one that is going to be an issue is things like the Olympics, right? I'm living in Japan right now, and this is the year, 2020, that we were planning on having the 2020 Japan Olympics, right? And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to have things sorted out by then, but definitely people are going to be a little bit more scared of traveling in 2020 to the Olympics. So I'm sure that a lot of people are considering maybe not coming to the Olympics, and that's going to have a massive effect on the economy in Japan because people have been preparing for a large boost in sales of just all sorts of things, hotel stays, just food, and just tourism in general. So sports, that's one thing. You probably need to have all the sports people in the same place. It's a little more difficult to have like a taekwondo match virtually, whereas obviously you can have an online fighting game tournament, and even then, because of the lag, we would much prefer to be doing it offline. But I keep thinking about developments and advances in technology recently, and I think about the fact that, most of the work that we do is writing documents, putting numbers into Excel, making phone calls to people. A huge number of people work in offices. Now, also there's a large number of people who don't work in offices, but those are the jobs that people have been worried about for the past few years, right? As automation increases and we have more robotic technology, things that can automate processes like manufacturing or even just the serving of food or the taking of orders. Like we can already order our food on an app, and then when we arrive at McDonald's, we just pick it up and walk away. These are the jobs that are the easiest to replace with automation. So we've already been wondering about what to do with those things for a long time. But I don't know why we haven't been worried about all the other things, like putting data into Excel spreadsheets and making phone calls, and a lot of these things also can be automated. So it's just a matter of time before everything can be automated and replaced with robotic technology or driverless cars and all that sort of thing. So in the interim, while we're still getting humans to put data into computers and make phone calls and write documents and make reports and make decisions for jobs like that, why are we doing them in offices? I really don't understand. Like, we've got the technology and it's very reliable to communicate over the internet, and even if we don't have the internet, we still have the ability to phone call people. And now we have our online systems. I'm sure that many of you already at work, you have a system that you log into when you get to work, and people are already sort of micromanaging all the tasks that you do because they've got it all digitally. And as scary as that may be, we could be using that to our advantage. Why don't we just send people home now? Now that we know exactly what everyone's doing and we can just have those documents sent to us as proof that they've actually finished those tasks, why are we still in the office doing them? And apart from, I don't know, it's kind of lonely to be at home, or maybe not everyone has a computer at home, I can't really think of any other reason. I guess the point that I'm really trying to make is that as a result of this virus situation happening, and instead of allowing us to build our technology so that we can all go home and work at home when we're ready for that sort of future to happen, it's happening right now, and it's being forced. And it's a big thing, especially for Japan, because Japan was waiting for the Olympics. And in preparation for the Olympics, there was a lot of news of how are we going to increase teleworking and getting people to work from home, because we don't want people commuting into Tokyo. And yet, that is the culture that has been building up in Japan this whole time, is the idea of going to work, even when you're sick, like especially a country like Japan, which loves to go to work, even when they're sick. And even if they do take the day off, they don't use their sick days. Well, I'm not going to say everyone, but a large majority of people, if they're sick in Japan, they won't use their actual sick leave. They'll just use their actual holiday days, because they're given 21 days of holiday days, and then they're given like a separate week of days which they can use for their sick leave. In addition to the fact that Japan doesn't want to use those holiday days or the sick days, most of the time, even if they're sick, they'll just show up to work anyway. I don't know really what the thinking is behind there, but it probably has something to do with showing dedication to one's work so hard that even if they're sick, they're going to show up. But in a situation like this, a virus situation, that has to go straight out the window, because it doesn't matter how dedicated you are to your job. You're actually putting the whole world at risk if you're still showing up at work and you're infected with a virus, right? So this virus situation, as terrible as it is, it's really forcing Japan to move more quickly in the direction that they thought that they needed to move anyway, which is getting to people to work more from home. And in my opinion, on top of that, getting people to stay at home if they're sick. As a result of being forced into this situation rather than being able to do it at their own pace, I think there's going to be a large number of detrimental effects that we're going to be seeing, in the next few months or in the next few years. If we get through this situation, hopefully we'll get through this situation, but then we'll start to see what the effects were of being forced to make changes as a result of thinking hard about how to get people to stay home and work from home and still be productive. It really got me thinking, what exactly is it that we need to do as people? Are we going to work because if we don't have work, we won't feel fulfilled? Are we going to work because we literally, as a society, cannot make enough products and enough money if we don't all go to work for 10 hours a day? Or are we all going to work just because that's what we've done, because in the Industrial Revolution, we created this idea of the 38-hour work week, and then we're just still going with it? And I'm genuinely trying to figure out what it is that comes next for humankind. And I don't know what it's going to be, because we can't all become Twitch streamers and YouTubers, right? There's only so much space for entertainment. And so the question is, what does everyone do? And then the next question after that is, do we have to do anything at all? All right, let's have some of this Ethiopian sidamo. Now, this is a job that we need people to do. We need them to harvest these beans for us. But then again, can that be automated as well? Oh, it's like a spicy sunset. It really does have a spice to it. I don't really know how they do that. I really do think that humankind has come to a point where we have to decide, now that we have automation coming in, what do we do with ourselves? And then the question that comes even before that is, now that automation is coming in, do we have to do anything with ourselves? If automation can handle the harvesting of food for us, and if automation can also handle getting us from A to B with driverless cars, and if automation can also do all of our paperwork, and if automation can use artificial intelligence and neural networks and as much research as is physically available technologically to give us diagnoses, then even the work of doctors could be massively helped by technology. I think from my experience in hospital a couple of years ago, I think we probably still need nurses, though, where I think maybe doctors need to give the final diagnosis. I don't think they won't need to be like in the hospitals as much anymore. They can like work from home and they can just consult. They'll be like given a video feed. They'll be like, okay, yeah, it looks like this, and we've got high enough quality cameras that we can still see very well what we're looking at without being there with our own physical eyes diagnosing these patients. The nurses, since they have to actually jab you with, all the medicines that's going to go into your arms and all that, I don't know how possible it is to get a machine that can do that. I don't think we're at that point yet. So I think we'll still need nurses. Even for food, I'm pretty sure that food could also be automated. But for the meantime, I see that restaurants will also need people there on the spot. But for the things that I do when I go out, right, I go to work, but then after that, maybe I'll go to like the Red Bull Gaming Sphere and I'll play Street Fighter or Grand Blue Fantasy Versus at one of these fighting game events. And essentially, they've got like a couple staff there, but even then, the staff don't really need to do much. It's obviously the staff involved in setting up the PlayStations, but if we could find a way to automate the work with the PlayStations, we could just set them and forget them, just leave them there. And as long as we have security cameras, then we can help people using like an intercom system so that people could work from home and say, okay, look, PlayStation number 35 is not functioning anymore, but you need to just log out, relog back in with this thing, and it will work. The only thing that would need a person to be there would be to like physically pick up the PlayStation and pack it up at the end of the day. But I think for the 5 or 6 hours in the evening that Red Bull is running like a fighting game event, they don't actually need to have any staff there, as long as they had a secure enough and resilient enough intercom, I say intercom, like a phone system, so they could like phone up the person, like a person who's literally on duty for those 5 hours to sort out problems with the PlayStations, or just make sure that, if the internet router is broken, like someone can like reset it, change the background music, or I don't know, stuff like that. But you've seen what's happened with like telepresence, right? There's all these conferences and things where people can show up with like just a screen with their face, and it's on this tripod with little wheels, and it just rolls around at the events, and people don't have to actually be there. Of course, there is so much that showing up physically to an event does bring, so I'm not saying that it's completely pointless, that we don't need it anymore. But I do see a world where 90% of the people showing up to events could be there virtually, and that would be probably better, because it means that we could fit more people into these events. The only ones that will be especially difficult will be the ones that are time sensitive. So the ones where you're like playing a fighting game and you would need to be on a machine with no lag. So you probably want to at least be in the same room. But for things like presentations, like a lot of that can work just through online. And I think that for the rest of this year, we're going to see a lot of things like E3 and other presentation type events. We're going to see how they handle going completely online. Even Street Fighter, they're trying to have lots of online qualifiers for their Intel version, their Intel strain of the Olympics, which is a little bit scary because people are going to be qualifying for this event, but there's some of them on PC, some of them on PlayStation. It sounds like a headache. I wish them the best, but I think it's going to be difficult. I just don't really know what it is that humans need to do. So robots in factories, robots making our food, robots driving our cars, and robots doing our diagnoses and neural network analysis of information and helping patients. I do foresee that technology can help us massively by doing a whole lot of this stuff for us. The question is, as a result of all this automation, will the human workload get even higher? Will there be even more stuff that we need to do as a result? Maybe to, I don't know, provide all the electricity that's going to be required for all this. So let's just imagine it's not like that, right? As a result of all this automation, we're actually completely freed up with our time. And now we can be at home where we're actually spending time with our families, which is a big issue in Japan. People love, it's not that they love to, but it's part of the culture, being stuck at work and, forcing themselves to continue to work long hours after work so that they can impress their boss and they can get their promotion and then get as much money as is required to raise a family. That's a whole different topic for another time, because it is definitely a thing in Japan that it's such a hard-working society that as a result, people often don't see their families very much at all. And there's definitely been a lot of issues. I remember in the past 5 or 6 years where, sons were like completely lost the ability to communicate with their mothers, or for example, or just fathers who just don't meet their children at all because they're always getting home after the children have already gone to bed because they need to be in bed early so they can go to school the next day. The society that we've built, I feel like it was a solution to whatever was the issue. People needed to be off the streets, and so we put them in education. People needed to be off the streets, and so we put them in factories. People needed to be in factories for longer, and so we created the 38-hour work week. People overwork, and then even after they're overworked, they're still doing overtime after the overwork, and then they're not meeting their own families, and then people are developing illnesses, or let's say illnesses, conditions where they're unable to communicate with their own mothers and fathers, and that's going to, who knows, in like the next 20 years, how are those kids, when they grow up and they're going to be parents, how is it going to manifest mentally? I mean, it's complicated. So as terrible as this situation is with this virus, it's forcing a country like Japan to definitely think about what we're doing with our time. And now that people are unable to go to work, not everyone, but since a large number of companies are saying, for the next couple of weeks, everybody stay at home. We want to find out who has this virus, and if they have the virus, we want them to not spread it. It's going to be really important to put all these countermeasures in place as soon as possible so that we reduce the spread early so that the health system doesn't become overwhelmed later. All the news that you've been hearing in other places as well. But in doing so, they're being forced to think about how people can continue to be productive even when they're at home. And now it makes me think about, now that automation is coming in, how productive is it that we actually have to be? If we are able to work at home, how much of this stuff that we do on Excel is actually necessary. And if it's not actually necessary that humans are doing it, then how do we justify giving money to each different person? What will people do when we realize that we don't have to work all day, every day? What can we do to justify receiving money to continue to do the things that we want to do? I guess in a situation where a large number of jobs that are replaced by automation, it means that we only have to pay the electrical cost of getting the machine to do that job, right? And so if the cost is massively down, then I imagine that there could be a way for the government to just massively increase the tax on the profit that companies make, because they're not having to pay as workers as much as they used to, right? Because there are no workers in the building anymore. And if that taxed money could be increased highly enough, then isn't it possible that everyone could just be paid like a certain amount, and that if they wanted more money, then they could go and look for extra jobs to do in their spare time? If automation replaced almost everything, and everyone was left kind of twiddling their thumbs at home like, I don't know what to do with myself because I've got nothing to do, at that point, it all becomes volunteering or of your own volition to go out and find cool stuff that you can do that makes you extra money. So creating a unique product that no one else has, innovating something new that people still need. Entertainment is one, of course. Running local cafes or running local events, all the stuff that happens in real life that can't be replicated by robots. But I feel like it won't be necessary to do those things to get like your basic income. Even if automation allowed us to have enough money to give everyone the basic income that they need to live without working, because there's no jobs for them to do anyway, pretty sure they'd find a way to incur costs on us so that that income would not be enough, and that we'd all be struggling and grabbing at these other jobs in order to keep our income high enough to actually pay off our expenses. And then at that point, instead of arguing over who should be doing these factory level type jobs or these task based jobs, we're going to be fighting over the other jobs that are like creative based, or trying to entertain, or trying to provide unique services, or local cafes or local events and that sort of thing. I don't know, I don't have the answer, just thought about it while I was having a cup of coffee today. In addition to the fact that we're locked up at home trying to avoid going out spreading the virus or catching the virus, it really got me thinking about what's going to happen to our world even after the virus, if it eventually does blow over. What are humans going to do when we're all at home and we're trying to work from home, and we discover that all these tasks that we've been setting for ourselves aren't actually necessary, and before very long, you'll see automation will replace so much of what we do. It's even possible that automation will replace music and entertainment, because if they can figure out the formula for what we think is funny, then with enough analysis, I'm pretty sure that AI could come up with jokes and music as well. Whoa, chill. Someone just started up their car. Anyway, what do you think is going to happen as a result of us all trying to work from home? Do you think it's actually not easy for us to work from home? And if you think it's not easy for us to work from home, what do you think is exactly getting in our way that's preventing us from actually succeeding in this task? And if you do see us eventually being able to work from home, what do you think it is we're going to be doing after automation takes over? Because automation is already slowly but surely taking over. In most cases, I think it's going to be a good thing. A lot of these tasks, humans don't really need to be doing. These repetitive tasks, or trying to analyze data, which is just so much easier to do through computing and artificial intelligence and neural networks. And then on top of that, not just what are we going to do when we're at home, but do we actually have to do anything? Is it possible to have a world where we all just sit around idly at home and just go out and live leisure lifestyles? And if that is the case, how do we get income? Is it just provided to us by the government? Or do we have to supplement our income by coming up with fun other things to do? Like everyone becomes a YouTuber, or everyone becomes a Twitch streamer, or everyone starts making stuff on Etsy and selling t-shirts. I have no idea. I was just drinking coffee and thinking about it, and well, there's a virus out there, so we're all at home kind of twiddling our thumbs and thinking about it. That's all I've got for now. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, share the links, and all that great stuff. And more importantly than anything else, stay healthy, wash your hands, please, and take care out there. See you next time.